G'day and welcome to Media Tech Talk. I'm David Richards.
And I'm Paul Luckett. Advertising technology has become increasingly sophisticated. The global digital advertising market is now valued at over $600 billion annually, with programmatic accounting for more than 70% of digital display spend and connected TV growing at double-digit rates year on year. At the same time, marketers are managing campaigns across dozens of platforms, channels, and data sources, increasing both complexity and operational workload. Adobe is working to simplify that model across bid strategy, audience targeting, reporting, and optimization across fragmented systems. Through its advertising platform, Adobe is bringing together data, creative, and media execution into a unified workflow, supported by a business generating over $19 billion in annual revenue with more than 29,000 employees globally and operations across 100 countries.
And Adobe continues to invest heavily in artificial intelligence, embedding machine learning into campaign optimization, audience targeting, and activation, as part of a broad shift toward more automated campaign execution. Greg Collison is head of product marketing for Adobe Advertising, where he leads the development of these capabilities across the demand-side platform and broader advertising ecosystem. This includes Adobe's move into Agentic AI, focused on reducing manual effort and improving how campaigns are planned, executed, and optimized. So today's discussion focuses on how that shift is being implemented within the advertising layer and what it means for the industry. So here's the question. What happens as Adobe moves into Agentic AI, reducing the human effort required to run campaigns, and where will the industry see the biggest impact? Greg, welcome to the show. Whereabouts in the USA are you calling in from today?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm calling in from just outside the Bay Area in sunny California.
Awesome. Is it sunny?
Yeah, today it is. Today it is on brand and sunny. I think 72, which is just perfect.
Perfect, yeah. I think it works out to about 25 Celsius if I've got the conversions right. It's always one of those ones. Big fan of Star Trek. They always work on metric and come back to the US in today's world. It's always in imperial. We've got to get you guys across the line. Yeah. So whereabouts is Adobe located in San Francisco?
So headquarters are in San Jose. Yep. Which is about an hour south of San Francisco, but we do have another big office, a couple of offices actually in the city specifically.
Love it. Awesome. Well, we've got a big show to get through today. Let's start with you, looking back across your journey in programmatic and ad technology. What were the defining experiences that shaped how you think about building advertising platforms today?
I love this question. I feel like so often when we try to look back at 20, 25 years of experience, we're just listing company names or job titles. It's really fun to distill key learning. So I thought, great question. Yeah. I'm going to broaden it and actually do a couple of vignettes across the whole career. I didn't start in media. I didn't start in ad tech. My very first job coming out of college, I worked for a technology consulting firm. And we were basically kind of in the trenches with customers as they would try to select, customize, implement, and roll out third-party technology. And those projects were anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And the key from that experience that I really took away was customer empathy, because I spent 3 months shoulder to shoulder with the people that were going to use the product. And so this idea of really understanding your customer, understanding their day job, understanding their pain points, and trying to take all of that insight and transform it into technology that actually works, actually delivers benefit and value. Huge learning for me. And again, it's ironic because it was almost like trying to build software for one company at a time, right? Starting from some third-party solution, but it was this really great example of going deep with a customer and translating those insights into technology that delivers value. So that was awesome. That was a great starting point. After that, I went to more of a management consulting chapter of the career. And so that's less about technology. That's more about big picture strategy. That's working with senior executives, solving big strategic problems. We're analyzing markets, competitors, customer trends, but more at scale. And so I still loved all of the consumer research, like how do our customers think? How do they select products? How do we differentiate versus competition? What is, how do we market, but what's the real product truth that's really going to set us apart? But again, I think the big learning for me there was, again, instead of solving for like one customer at a time, one company at a time, this is now scaled strategy across markets, across the globe to win at scale, which was another kind of interesting layer for me as I was kind of developing my own product sense and business sense. And after kind of those 2 chapters in consulting, I went into product. And I feel like I've been kind of intentional about doing product both in a B2B context and a B2C context, because I think those are pretty different. But so the last experience I'll highlight was my time at Intuit, which was really B2C. I was looking after QuickBooks, and my job was to take QuickBooks into 6 different international markets. And so I learned a ton. Again, it's all centered around understanding the customer, but my job was to really figure out product market fit. And Intuit, I think, is one of the best companies and product organizations around things like human-centered design and product-led growth. Kind of before it was a buzzword, they've really been big on this idea of really understanding your customer, going broad to understand a problem or a set of solutions before you narrow in on how you want to solve that in your technology, how you can build kind of scrappy tests to prove or disprove hypotheses around your product. And so to me, again, product market fit, human-centered design, and really trying to build product experiences that don't just like do the job, but that really delight your customers, that they enjoy using, zero friction, easy to learn, all that stuff. It's hard. And I think B2C companies really focus on that because they often don't have like a B2B sales force to go help, sort of cover up some of those pieces of the product. And so it's a great opportunity for me to learn, what it takes for product to really win on its own merits.
That's amazing.
In a B2C context.
Yeah, that's all the scope.
Yeah, it's a cool thing now, and I'll pause after that. But it's like, so now at Adobe Advertising, I get to take all of those experiences, all of those learnings, all of those kind of strategies and philosophies around product and business and differentiation, and really try to build that into our team and our culture, right? How do we get customer obsessed? How do we make sure that we understand the pain points our customers are facing? How do we really think about experimenting with our product to know that we're solving that. We're not just shipping features, we're delivering value. It's really fun. So again, I feel like where I am now is this awesome kind of culmination of those different experiences.
Yeah, love it.
As a QuickBooks customer myself, I moved across from Xero over to QuickBooks, and I can definitely attest to it being, I found it to be a much better platform to work with. So whatever they're doing over there, and whatever their strategy is, it's working.
Yeah, good people, hard work. Yeah.
It kind of sounds like you've had a pretty varied career in the different, not just the different companies, but the different ways that you've been looking at markets, from technology consulting, management consulting, product development. Was that an intentional strategy for you going out there? I also love how many people we've had on this show that have worked in consulting at some point. I feel like I'm part of a family now. Was that an intentional strategy from your perspective, just to kind of try these different areas, or is it just kind of something that just happened?
A little bit of both. I think, I'm a believer in trying to be intentional where you think there's real value and you've got clarity around like the value of some of those experiences. So for me, that notion of like, I wanted to practice building product in B2B and B2C, that was intentional because I recognized the difference and I thought I would be a better product manager, a better product leader if I practiced both. But some of it is just about following passion and opportunity. And so some of that makes a lot of sense when you look back, but it wasn't, a master plan from the beginning. And I kind of look at my consulting journey and even my transition into product as a little bit of following that passion. Because again, after having done the technology consulting and the strategy consulting, what was clear to me is I love the strategic thinking. I love solving those problems. I love coming up with those theories and hypotheses, but it drove me crazy to sort of hand over a deck and walk away and do the next thing. I loved the opportunity to really like put it into practice. And again, there's so much learning that happens when you have an idea, put it in practice, pay attention to see if it works the way you thought it would, and then iterate from there. And so to me, that is the fun part about being a product manager. I almost feel like, product managers are scientists, right? We all remember the scientific method from middle school, hypothesis, experiment, results, analysis, like over and over and over again. That's our job. And so I feel like I kind of fell into that. I reached that conclusion just through a collection of experiences, but then, some of it was intentional.
It's a real discipline, isn't it? I think consulting in such a broad space. So look at what KPMG and Deloitte do. And we've just been speaking with the CEO of OzTam, our television ratings provider here in Australia, and the depth and breadth that they have and the control that they have over the industry. But they have to be so responsible in the sense of discipline and having processes and the reporting structures in place so that they can operate at that level. And the knowledge that you would have to, have and being able to clearly articulate that back to your clients as well. It's a real skill.
Absolutely. And we did a bunch of work with Nielsen in the States, and I spent a bunch of time with the OzTam guys as well. And to your point, once you become a currency, you also have a responsibility to maintain, like, you're trying to innovate, you're trying to do new things, but you also have to maintain kind of like a solid and consistent baseline. So there's a lot of responsibility and I think creativity that comes with that for those companies. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think with what's going on with kind of the modern AI tools and things like that, there's a lot of talk around how that's affecting the consulting space? And I think in particular, I'd say kind of the big four and those types of large consultancies. Is that, I'm sure we'll get into a lot of AI stuff today, but is that something that you kind of see from your just experience of having worked in there as well?
Look, I think, just based on my own experience, like you say, having been in consulting, but now kind of spending all my time in product, I use AI every day to do my job differently and better. And I think that's going to be true across a lot of different kind of roles and functions. It's funny, my team jokes, I build really good decks, and I kind of respond with, well, that's because I'm a recovering consultant. They sort of really drill into you, what makes a good story? How do you tell a good story? How do you say it in slides, right? What is the right amount of information? There's a lot that goes into it. But I'll tell you, I've got mixed feelings. Like, there's parts of that I think are great because then that influences how you think. And, sometimes I think in slides, I think in bullets, I feel like I can be a good communicator. But I also spend a lot of time just working in PowerPoint to, top a line, left a line, there's a lot of hours spent on very manual, very tedious tasks that I would love to have help automating. So I think there's some of that just on the deck work, on kind of producing the assets. And then clearly the actual, strategic analysis, collection of data, synthesizing mountains of data into condensed summary. I think everyone's going to find ways to be faster and better with the help of AI, and I wouldn't be surprised, if the big four are going to find the right balance there as well.
On to focusing more on Adobe. For those that are watching, if you can break it down simply, what is the Adobe advertising platform today, and what are the core products and capabilities it's delivering?
Yeah, okay. And I know we're going to spend a bunch of time deep diving, so I'll kind of start at the high level, and then we can sort of peel the onion. But at the top level, our mission is really to help advertisers maximize the performance and impact of their paid media budgets, right? So the keywords there are performance and impact. That really matters to us. Again, we can talk about that. We do that in a couple of different places. So we help with this in search and social, and we also help with this in sort of the open internet. But not surprisingly, those are very different ecosystems, and so the way that we do that in each of those is different. Within search and social, we're more of a complement to the publisher tech that lives in those ecosystems, controls those ecosystems. In the open web, we have a DSP that does what you would expect a DSP to do. We have sort of granular controls over, the media buy. And so there's a lot we can do there. But again, our mission and our focus is really around maximizing performance and impact. And we've got a bunch of cool technology that helps us do that. But that's our mission. That's our reason for being.
Okay. I think let's just have a quick look back on what the DSP is. That's because I just lost the brand name. It's gone completely where it came from. Gone completely off my mind. Sorry. No, it's gone completely blank. But I think what Adobe does well is where it sees successful businesses and buys those businesses and bring them into its own ecosystem. And with the DSP in that technology space has been part of that evolution as well. Do you still see that as being part of the Adobe advertising ecosystem where you see new technologies coming in from outside, or are you evolving that to build them inside with your own dev team?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right when you look at kind of Adobe. Again, we sit in the digital experience business unit, and you're right that over the last 15 years, there's been a series of acquisitions to really build a complete portfolio of solutions that help. I'm going to give you the Adobe speak here, kind of orchestrate digital experiences across all of the touch points, right? Because we know it's complicated. Advertising is important. It's often the front door to a brand, but it's just the first set of experiences. Then they come to the site. So Adobe has tools to personalize on-site experiences. They have tools for personalizing and orchestrating marketing campaigns. They've got web analytics as a measurement layer across all of it. There's a CDP. Now we have creative products. So there's an entire suite that's focused on orchestrating digital experiences end to end. A lot of those started with acquisition, because they're all big, meaty, massive customer problems. And so to sort of accelerate that portfolio, acquisition was the way to start. But I think Adobe's got this great track record of post-acquisition really driving innovation and kind of product development within each of those areas now as part of the Adobe family. So that's kind of the journey that we've been on. You're right to say that a bunch of the advertising products came in through acquisition as well. The DSP was originally TubeMogul.
That's it.
Almost 10 years ago. 2016, I think. So we've been in-house with Adobe for a long time, and a lot has happened since the acquisition. But yes, absolutely. Lots of innovation and product development internally.
Yeah, and that's good to see. And I think one of the great, we were talking before we came on to the show, just one of the great strengths that Adobe has is the ecosystem. Just having a single ID. We talk about signal loss in the digital media industry quite frequently. Adobe having that single ID pushed out to across all of its digital technology platforms has to be a major advantage. I tend to feel sometimes it's not well recognized in the industry.
Yeah, well, we're happy to evangelize it, like you say. We think it's pretty special. And again, back to the evolution. I think we've been in programmatic for a long time, and so one of the fundamental observations, at least from our perspective, right? There's lots of different teams, lots of different philosophies, but one of the observations that sort of struck us is that as we talk to brands and agencies in programmatic, it feels like there's this long arc of continued kind of pressure and momentum to make programmatic more accountable, as accountable as possible, right? We've seen this from the early days of programmatic and viewability, like all the things, right? And so, obviously that doesn't mean like all digital advertising is performance oriented down to final conversions. That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is, brands want to be able to measure their media, and to the extent they can, they want to be able to optimize. Again, not always to bottom of the funnel conversions. Maybe it's driving new site visitors. Maybe it's signups. Maybe it's any of those high value on-site actions that help sort of progress a customer journey from sort of unknown to known, non-customer into sort of a loyal customer. And so like that's been a big push for us, is to say, look, if marketers, brands and agencies want to make their programmatic media more performant, that's something that we want to help with. And so, in the very beginning, when I talked about our mission is make media performant, maximize performance and impact, that's kind of where that comes from, right? Is we think our customers want that, and so we want to deliver that. And I think you're right to say that our connection into the wider Adobe ecosystem helps us do that in some really interesting ways, right? Because of course, every DSP, lots of DSPs talk about performance. That's not a unique claim. And again, every DSP tries to sort of maximize performance based on the assets that they have, assets and capabilities. That's great. Again, I think that's wonderful. Some DSPs have their own data or inventory, right? Google has a lot of data, Yahoo has data, it's wonderful. We know Trade Desk is trying to do a lot of things with direct inventory partnerships to try to create, some unique opportunities for their customers. For us, the thing that we have due to our connection with the broader Adobe is really two things. One, Adobe has a whole suite of products that are focused on helping brands measure what happens on site and in-app for that brand, right? These site analytics tools. And what we've come to really believe is that data asset is really valuable for a brand, because that data asset tells you everything about everybody who comes to your site. And you can draw some really valuable intelligence out of that. And so we've built our DSP to mine that site data. Again, when a brand wants us to, right? If a brand wants us to use that site data to power programmatic, we use that in some really powerful ways, right? When most people talk about first-party data, they just talk about retargeting segments, which again, that's a valid use case. That's a totally valid use case. But we can do a whole lot more. We let a brand tell us what are the high-value actions you care about on your site. And again, it doesn't have to just be like a final conversion event. And then we can analyze the site traffic and we can say, great, now we've got this whole, almost like cohort analysis of high, medium, low value users. We can score all the users. We can then take that kind of user level understanding and we can marry it up with all the bid stream data that we see and do some really powerful things to either find those high value users, find more of those high value users, and really get this really sophisticated understanding of the value of a user, the value of a context, a site, time of day, day of week, all these things connected to that deep understanding of the users that matter most to a brand, and then build our entire performance algorithm around that data. So each brand basically gets a custom algorithm built around the entirety of their first-party data. And the cool thing is it's not just like a strategy, right? Because we talked about it, right? Strategies are fun, but you have to see if it works. And the great thing is over and over and over again for brands that are trying to drive those high-value site actions, this approach to optimization has been really powerful. So that's thing number one, right? You talked about data. That's how we use data. The second thing I would call out, and again, you can stop me anytime, but the second thing I would call out is again, what we do with creative. And again, we've been in programmatic a long time. I think it's pretty fair to say that creative optimization has not been widely adopted.
Yeah.
And look, there's plenty of reasons for it, right? Biggest reason was no one had enough creative. We talked about personalizing at scale for a decade, but when you only have two creatives that you refresh, every 6 months, you don't really have the raw materials for it. But we really believe that's changing with generative AI, right? Generative AI now kind of unlocks content velocity, if you will. And so Adobe is doing a ton of work here to help enterprise marketers harness the power of generative AI to build more ads or more, creative content that is always on brand. Because that's the fear with AI, right? Is it just kind of spits out a bunch of stuff that is not enterprise grade, doesn't represent the brand. So Adobe's worked really hard to make sure that, yes, we can do generative AI, but we're going to do it in a way that fits within your brand guidelines.
Greg, can I just ask you on that? Can I just ask you on the generative AI piece? Obviously, there are people that watch this from a creative point, on the creative agency, if you like. Where does that come into play? Are we talking like a base model or an image that that you upload, and does the system then identify key points in that and then rebuild that for dynamic creative solutions? Is that what we're talking about?
So you're right to say that they're different use cases. So
Yeah.
let's try to break it down. I think to me, the way I think about this is there's like the 0 to 1 building a hero ad, a hero asset. And then the second step is, okay, great. Now I want to generate multiple versions or variants of that. Generally speaking, Adobe has tools that can support that whole spectrum. For us in advertising and even DX, we're not really trying to assist in that 0 to 1 creation of the hero ad. That to me, that's creative teams, that's creative agencies. They've got a whole suite of products for that. Again, art, science, all of it.
Yeah.
The thing that we're trying to help with is once you have that hero ad, there's all this variant generation that you'd like to do with it, right? All the sizes, all the languages. Okay, that's super easy. But what if I wanted 3 versions to figure out, like, is it better to have an image with, parents and young kids, or like singles with pets? Which of those is actually going to perform and resonate? And not just resonate in aggregate, but for specific customer segments.
Yep.
And so that's that notion of either creative experimentation or personalization, where you either have a concept and you just wish you could adapt one version for men versus women, or millennials versus, but whatever the distinction is. But it's that kind of building of variance, sort of going from one to many, that candidly has either been like really expensive, or oftentimes it was just not done because it was expensive.
Let me jump in, because I think there's a couple of areas. I've seen a couple of versions of this at the recent Adobe AI Summit. Yep. And one of the takeaway pieces for me was they had a car commercial, and the car, let's just, for the sake of the discussion, use BMW in a setting on a city street, and they had an actor, if you like, walking up to the car and then walking past the car, as you'd expect to see on the tag of a TVC, right? That AI was able to change the color of the car, but also change what the person was wearing in what made it look like it was real time. And I think the setting for that, as you said, with personalisation, if you wanted to have the female in Mary Tyler Moore look, walking through the city, or if you wanted to have parents with kids, you could quite easily do that with this generative AI solution without having to go through the whole production piece of shooting and aligning it. But I think the part that was really cool for me was that the car and the setting didn't change. It was, locked into place, and it was so unique. And if I saw that delivered to my computer or viewing platform, I wouldn't know that was a targeted ad specifically for me and my data profile that has been collected. And I just thought that was actually really, really cool. And I think that's where it opens up creative ideas and solutions around things that we probably wouldn't have had the time or opportunity to do before.
Exactly. I agree completely. And I think, a couple of things to add to that. One, in the way we've implemented this, the creative teams can define which parts of that ad or that creative experience are editable versus which are locked.
Yeah.
Right? Because maybe, to your point, you want the scene to stay the same. Obviously, you want the construction of the car to stay the same. So you don't want this to be a free-for-all where everyone can change everything. So there's a bunch of controls around what can be changed, what can't be changed. And then, the other thing about it, to me, as I said, I treat all of this like an experiment, right? And so sometimes you have a great conviction around the big elements of the ad, but maybe you don't know exactly the man or the woman, the kids or the pets, the red or the black car. Maybe you don't know exactly which of those is really best. And so this idea of being able to generate multiple versions, put them in market, and then one of the things our system will do is actually, kind of experiment at scale. We'll start with an even distribution of impressions across all of them. And then as we start to identify patterns of what's working better for different audience cohorts, we'll shift the impression volume to the better performing ads. So you're constantly in this up and to the right experimentation mode, because it's easier to build more versions and variants, right? That's what we want to unlock for customers.
Are we seeing, with the introduction of new screen formats, specifically around wearable technology like glasses, are we seeing dynamic creative really coming to the fore as a result of those new screens coming into play? Because I'm finding it a little hard where we've got IAB standard formats out there, MREX and leaderboards as an example, that those standards are going to be important, but where we've got dynamic creative, I feel that it's just going to really find its way with these new solutions that are coming up for consuming content. It's going to be hard.
So I love this conversation, and I guess I have two minds. One, I always love to think ahead and try to, have some hypotheses around what's going to happen. And I think you're right. Like from a hypothesis perspective, that makes a ton of sense to me. The funny thing though is I also try to ground like this in a little bit of like what's happening today, what is the practical conversation. And again, historically, in my experience, very few programmatic advertisers have really built a robust playbook for dynamic creative optimization, even for display, which is arguably like the least complex and the most approachable. And so honestly, like we're thinking about and planning for like the future, but really I'm also very focused on just helping customers try it for the first time and experience the value and the ease at which this is now possible. Because again, I would say historically, programmatic advertisers have spent a lot of time optimizing the media, a lot of time optimizing like data and audience, and just not as much time on creative. And again, there's good reasons for that, but I think those reasons we're starting to chip away at those barriers, that headwind. Yeah. And so now it's really fun because there's this new lever that has a big impact on performance, and we can help customers really step into that and experience the value.
Yeah, I like that analysis and insight. I think definitely the technology has been on delivery. We've had data play out for the last 10 years. We've obviously had devices in there that we've been talking about mobile, etc. But I think with being able to dynamically update content on the fly based on all of those coming together, I think that's going back to what I was saying about Adobe having access to all of those technology platforms. I think there's a whirlwind of opportunity that's going to come forward. I hope, at least, anyway. So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask quickly, Greg, one more thing on the creative side of things. One thing that we're kind of seeing, I'm seeing particularly in content generation broadly right now is, I guess, kind of predictably so, in my opinion, some concerns starting to be raised around authenticity of content creation in the LLM kind of, Gen AI era. Is this something that you think from an advertising perspective, advertising is a little bit kind of protected from that, just in the way that advertising has always been kind of highly edited and very, I guess, different from kind of authentic content in terms of like articles being written and things like that, I guess is what I'm thinking about. And is that something that you guys are considering as well, as that authenticity piece?
So first of all, I totally agree with your kind of call out around content authenticity and the importance there. Adobe at large is doing a lot of work here to try to help shine a light on content authenticity, or being really clear about kind of stamping metadata onto assets that were created via AI using Adobe tools. Another thing that Adobe has really emphasized and invested in is ensuring that when you use our generative AI tools, we're only training them on kind of like raw assets that we have rights to use. So we're not using the global internet for that training data. So there's a bunch of stuff that I do think Adobe's doing. And again, personally, I'm now much more wary when I see kind of headlines that are surprising. I've had to train myself to really maybe look for a double check if I'm really going to believe it. I would just say advertising, I do think, is a little bit insulated, only because this is not the land of user generated content. Ads are purchased by an enterprise. They pay for it, and they've uploaded the creative, and they've attached the ad to, they've done all the work to make intentional choices about what creative they want to show. And so there's a responsibility there to do those ads the right way. But I think there's less opportunity that someone else's spoofy creative is going to show up as an ad for an enterprise marketer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah, that's the licensed content for the generation. I think that's a really good call out to make. That's another thing that with a lot of conversation right now around kind of ethical AI usage and things like that. So that's great. Yeah. Getting into kind of the campaign workflow side of things, where you guys are currently sitting in the platform, what would a typical kind of campaign, what does the workflow currently look like today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, and you might laugh, I think our, workflows are largely similar to like every other DSP. And that's going to sound silly, but like, all of software kind of operated on this traditional paradigm of users going to screens, clicking on buttons, entering information, saving, you know what I mean? Like that's how it worked. So, we were a UI-oriented workflow where customers had to manually enter information and make decisions and take action. And so but and I know that sounds really high level, but what do? We help customers plan, buy, measure, and optimize their programmatic campaigns. So we have workflows for setting up campaigns. We have workflows for, kind of reviewing in-flight campaigns. We have, troubleshooting experiences if there's a problem with a spend or a KPI number. We have reporting experiences where you can kind of understand what worked and what didn't work and try to glean insights for the next campaign. And so maybe it sounds trivial, but I think all DSPs have versions of that. And historically, all DSP and all software had this, kind of UI-oriented model for how users interacted with the system. And of course, we try to make those screens and those workflows simple. We try to make them scalable, for things like bulk tools, because we know, customers are operating at scale. But the crazy thing is that like all of that is sort of getting rethought in this world of agentic. And so, the next version of making products more delightful, easier to use, faster to learn, is not, simpler screens or condensed workflows. Agentic experiences really kind of offer us a new, almost paradigm for how we think about how consumers want to interact with software. And so that's, and again, I know all DSPs are thinking about that, but that, I think that's the journey now. That's a little bit of the pivot for us, is really making sure, we're kind of taking both those approaches. And as I said at the beginning, trying to build just delightful, intuitive, efficient product experiences.
And is this something that you guys are seeing, you mentioned agentic in workflows, in modern workflows. Is this something that you guys are seeing really starting to shorten that time to actually get something live?
Yeah. And it's almost crazy. It's so fun to sort of be building products like right now at this point in time. And again, I felt the same way 18 to 24 months ago when we first started using generative AI, right? And then again, I know it's all these terms get confusing, but we've been using predictive AI for 10 years. This idea of like predicting the value of a user, trying to predict the most efficient bid price in an auction, like all that. We've had predictive AI for a decade. Generative AI is this idea of like, prompt to image, prompt to video, all the kind of dynamic creative stuff we were just talking about. 24 months ago, that felt like magic. It was unbelievable to experiment with that, to play around with that. And now the amazing thing is, it is, maybe not commonplace, but it doesn't feel as magic anymore. It's still very special. It's still very helpful, very effective, but you're seeing generative AI all over the place, right? And so, and again, I would even argue right now, having a model to build an image is not even like, that's not even the most differentiated thing. It's more content authenticity. It's being able to do it on brand, maybe even the creative intelligence that comes from it. But again, the point is, I felt this way about generative AI 2 years ago. And it's like, I think you can kind of see the adoption and a little bit of like the mainstreaming of that technology. And I do think agentic is sort of like starting on that same path. It's obviously a little bit newer. And I know that there's like a spectrum of belief in terms of like how widely it will be used, and agent to agent, and like all of the potential futures. But the one thing that feels really clear to me is this: the LLMs are powerful enough and intelligent enough that they can help with a lot of these manual campaign activities. We talk about setup. Even in like the best usability or the most efficient workflows, that was still like, I don't know, maybe an hour, maybe a couple hours for a campaign manager. Even with uploads and all this, that's going to get even shorter. To me, the other part of it is, troubleshooting. Like, when you had a campaign that wasn't spending or wasn't performing, you had to really interrogate the data, because programmatic is complicated. You had to really interrogate the data to understand what is the specific thing that's getting in the way. What are the actions I could take to fix that? Which of those am I comfortable with? Which of those am I not comfortable with? But all of those activities, I think, again, we're not saying no more humans. We're just saying, let's empower people with tools that help them do things faster, with the insights they actually want. Hey, maybe with recommendations that they don't have to train a team to become experts in a product. Like, let's shorten that learning curve and make everybody an expert by kind of giving them an AI assistant that is really smart and is built around our system, our data, our best practices. That to me feels like a pretty logical outcome as like at least a first step, right? Agents to assist humans that are using the products. And over time, as people trust those agents more and more, the who does what might change. They might empower the agents to do more and more. But step one, let's help people. Let's prove that the agents know what they're doing. And then, we can follow our customers' lead on kind of the future.
Greg, I think from agents and all of what we've been talking about is amazing, but it really hinges on good supply and Adobe having access to that supply. How is Adobe evolving its access to the inventory across channels like connected TV, retail media, and the open web?
Yeah, so I think you're right that having sufficient supply and the most valuable supply, the right inventory it's almost foundational, right? I mean, none of this stuff works if you don't have access to enough inventory or the right inventory. So I think you're right that for us, that's, when I say table stakes, I don't mean that in a non-strategic way. I just mean like we couldn't survive without it. And so we're always investing in new formats and building partnerships with, inventory suppliers and publishers to try to make sure, again, we've got the most valuable inventory for our customers. I think, the open web, that's fairly mature. So maybe like CTV just that's newer, but I would also say that's getting to a pretty, steady state for us. We've been doing CTV forever. And actually, like one of the big things that we sort of pioneered a little bit, if I can toot my own horn a little bit, is like we really tried to bring this notion of performance to CTV. Because initially, as you know, your listeners know, the first kind of big question for advertisers was like linear versus CTV. And again, I would argue both of those have a role. We're not, that's not something we're really trying to overly influence. But once advertisers started spending in CTV, what we noticed was a lot of them were still thinking about it and targeting it and measuring it as if it was linear. So it was still like a reach frequency buy or a demo based buy, but it was in CTV. And what, you know, our angle, as you've heard me say, is kind of like performance. Again, not final purchase conversions, but like, hey, how do we figure out if someone who saw the ad came to the site? When they come to the site, what do they do next? Like, do they bounce right away or do they actually stay a while? Do they sign up for something? Do they view certain products? And so we invested a lot to really connect CTV exposures to on-site events so that we could do performance CTV. And again, now I think more and more DSPs are doing that. I think that's wonderful. Brands get to choose, you know, in their CTV strategy, what is upper funnel, you know, reach frequency, awareness, where are they trying to drive certain actions. But so again, we're all in on CTV. We do both versions, but we think the part that we do extra well is that performance piece. And then retail media, again, I think that's really exciting. You know, retail media, it can mean different things to different people and even different, you know, retailers. But it always has some combination of, like, you know, the retailer's audience data and sometimes, you know, advertising on the retailer site, right? Some do on-site, some do off-site, some do both. But this is something we believe in. Again, we're really trying to help our customers deliver the most performant ads as possible. And the cool thing is the other connection we have with Adobe is into Adobe's real-time CDP. And again, it's so fun to lead a DSP that's also connected to all these other products, because it would be impossible to build all of these things as a DSP person. It's just too much. It's too big. You know, your leadership or your investors would say, no, that's way too broad of a portfolio. Stay focused. But with our partnership with the CDP, right? Our CDP has a ton of data collaboration capabilities, which is sort of clean room like. So brands and publishers can do that kind of data match for executions, which to me is a really foundational part of the retail media network value proposition. And so, you know, we can take that matched audience or the extension that comes from it and then activate directly with the publisher on behalf of a brand. So we kind of tie into retail media either as a standalone DSP or as sort of connected to the CDP that's doing more of that data clean room, data collaboration work up front.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've seen the power of the CDPs just in my time working on leading a couple of those platforms, and being able to track the conversion from the purchase funnel when the user drops out before they've completed that purchase, and profiling them in the CDP and tracking them across Facebook and then bringing them back in for a conversion. You know, it's a huge revenue uplift for such a simple, you know, profile piece in a segment and tracking that user across the web. And I think for most advertisers who are trying to, you know, reclaim that, you know, I don't want to say last click conversions, but it definitely has that conversion. We need to be able to do that more efficiently and across the web more broadly, rather than just in the closed market, closed garden environments like Facebook, etc. I love seeing that space come to fruition. I think the DSP plays a big part in that, obviously being able to bring the advertisers together as well.
Exactly, and again, it's funny because sometimes when we think about or we draw these pictures of the customer journey, it's like so linear and so clean, and they advertising on site, email, as if it's like straight through. But to your point, and again, this is not a problem. This is the reality we need to like embrace. You know, it's messy, right? A customer comes to the site, they leave, and as a marketer, you might want to bring them back. You might want to have a second conversation with them. Yeah. And so the ability to sort of connect those insights and realize, okay, they came to the site, that was great, but we want to bring them back. And again, that's not always solved through email, or you don't want to just kind of passively wait until they come back. You want to actually encourage them to come, invite them back. And so I think, you know, that's obviously the role of paid media. And again, we can do that in a way that's connected to all those touch points and is additive to sort of like, you know, the overall relationship the brand is trying to build with that customer. Yeah,
like just deploying an ad that says, okay, for the next 20 minutes, you've got a 20% offer if you come back and complete your purchase funnel transaction with us. So, you know, just putting it, like they might be doing research across a number of other competing brands. That message alone will help them convert, I hope. But yeah, I want to see more of that. I think that's really smart technology at play. Have we got time for the product roadmap? Wow, this has been a good conversation.
You sound surprised.
Yeah, I was. I was hoping we'd go this deep, but I didn't. Yeah, that's good to know that we could. Where are we looking with Adobe's the Adobe advertising roadmap this year, and what are the key product updates and innovations that you're expecting to come out, and why?
Yeah, well, then I think the nice thing is, to your point, because we've had such a full conversation, I think what I'm about to say is going to make a lot of sense. But we are building out kind of more and more agentic experiences in the product. And again, just to be super clear, that is like, AI assisting humans. And so the way those kind of look and feel in our product, most of the experiences will have like an agent panel on, say, the right side of the screen, and then a canvas on the left side. And so as you're kind of chatting to the agent, it'll not just, explain its thinking. They all kind of explain their reasoning path and whatnot, but it's going to show you what it's building. So if you're using it to build creative variants, it's going to show you what it built. And if you want to make edits, you can do that via chat, or you can jump into the canvas and just manually control things. And so back to that notion of, AI assisted, humans in the loop, it's kind of that dual mode where if you want to do the whole thing via chat, you can kind of review and approve as you're going and then, finalize, that's easy. And if you want to get your hands dirty and make fine grain adjustments, great, you're welcome to do that too. And so that's the way it kind of works for things like building ads or setting up campaigns or, troubleshooting. We'll show you a bunch of data, recommend some changes, and you can either accept those changes or make other changes, right? All that kind of stuff is under the control of humans. But we're going to have, I would say, full agentic coverage, but not in like a marketing buzzwordy way, like meaningful experiences that really solve customer problems, right? Faster setup, streamlined troubleshooting, like, insights at your fingertips, easy to build ad variants so that, you can unlock those creative use cases that we talked about at the beginning. Like those are the types of agentic experiences that we're going to have out. And we're also going to at least find ways to test having those agents accessible via external connections.
Right.
Right?
What does that mean?
Well, so again, what we're building for right now is people log into our product, and then they use these agentic experiences to do their job, and that's great. We're happy with that. That's fine. But there are some customers who are kind of like exploring, hey, what if I want to interact with Adobe Advertising via my own internal agents? I'm going to build a Claude agent, and I don't want to log in directly to AdCloud. I just want to upload a media brief into my agent. And I want my agent to talk to Adobe Advertising agent. Now, again, we're not betting the ranch on this strategy, but the basic idea for us is we want to meet our customers where they are. And if our customers are building their own kind of agent operating system, for lack of a better word, we don't want them to feel like we are, walled up and inaccessible. We've got great tech. Our agents are going to make all these activities really easy to do, and we want to meet our customers where they are. And so we're gonna test this notion of interacting with our system via like some other external starting point, so that we can again kind of like test and learn alongside our customers to figure out how they want to interact with us. Right? We at the end of the day, what we're going to always be great at is performance. And it doesn't matter whether you set it up from your agent or in our agent or using the old UIs, right? All of that is just the front door. The core of the thing has to still be performance. And so we're going to give customers the ability to interact with the product however they want. And we're going to continue to make sure we're delivering like really special performance by unlocking their first party data and sort of maximizing the impact of creative, right? So that's kind of what I mean by those external access points.
Yep, that's cool.
So that's agentic. I'll go real fast. We're doing more on creative. We talked a lot about building creative, but the other thing I'm really excited for is creative intelligence.
Oh, well, okay.
Because very quickly, the first problem was we didn't have enough ads. But very quickly, the next problem is going to be like, well, now I have too many ads, right? And so this notion of having some really like strong intelligence to not only help people understand, okay, which ad's performing best for a cohort, that's easy. That's top level. The next question is, okay, great, but like which element in the ad is actually the thing that's driving performance? Is it the headline? Is it the call to action? Is it the image of the parent versus the image of the pets? Like, what is the piece of the creative that seems to be resonating? That's step 2. But be careful, because that might be too much data, right? Some people might know. The real question is for a customer who wants to build the next batch of ads, either because it's the next campaign, or customers are kind of hitting the point of fatigue with the first set of ads. Some customers are just going to say, look, just refresh the batch. Like, build me some new ones that are a little bit better. They're still using that same hero ad built by my awesome creative agency, but build me some new versions that are learning a little bit based on all this fancy intelligence. Just create prompts that go right back into the model that builds new ads, and let me review them. Let me approve them. Let me manually adjust them if I want to, but kind of connecting that loop from like building the ad to experimenting to then surfacing insights at the right level that are not overwhelming but actionable. I think that's really big for us, so look for that from us. And then the last thing I'll say, I talked a lot about how we use that analytics data to power optimization, and a lot of that's mainly the open web. But we're in conversation with some of the big publishers, walled garden publishers, to help apply some intelligence on top of those signals and share that back to the walled gardens. Because the walled gardens have like awesome optimization tech, but they don't have this signal from the enterprise. And so the idea is, hey, maybe we could, again, if a brand wants us to, package that signal, share it to the walled garden so the walled garden can achieve better outcomes using their tech, but the brand's data, right? Because that's what a brand wants. A brand wants to maximize the performance across all of their media spend, not just what our DSP is doing in the open web.
Can I ask, when we're talking walled garden, are we talking Facebook or going down the TikTok path, or where's your view on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if this is a capability that our customers buy into, right? This idea of like, I'm willing to share some sort of like signal back to walled gardens for the sake of improving performance. We would look to do this across all of the publishers that our brands are actively advertising in, right? Because again, this is like in service of our brands. We know they're spending tons of money with all the publishers you mentioned, plus Google, maybe plus Amazon. Like, the walled gardens have a ton of spend. And again, if there's a way that we can help our customers improve the efficiency or the impact, right? I said at the beginning, performance and impact. If we can help our customers achieve better performance and impact, even in those publisher walled gardens, like, we're happy to do that, right? We work for our customers. And so that's the third big opportunity for us.
I love it. That's been a big challenge for a large number of years, trying to figure out how you can crack crack into that walled garden environment. I'm hoping that we can find a unification solution in there soon. We can identify users in both areas and target them with campaign opportunities. Yeah, that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to build a roadmap right now, just given how quickly everything's changing in the AI space? Or is it just business as usual as far as like, roadmap development, in that it's kind of always challenging?
You know what's interesting? I think it's like a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, it's fair to say there are like some major areas of uncertainty. And for example, we didn't even get to talk about the possibility of ads in things like ChatGPT, and maybe that's a conversation for another time. But so the point is, like, there's a lot going on. But what I would say on the flip side, and this is like so fun, like, we are also using all of these AI tools to do our jobs differently. And we talked about this in the beginning, and it was like, hey, could consultants build better decks? But I'm telling you, like, the ability for product and design to move faster with prototypes and get those in front of customers and iterate insanely fast to find killer product experiences, that is turbocharged. Or the fact that we can take those prototypes, seamlessly transition them to our development team, who, with Claude Code immediately converts like a prototype into a V1 of code, also means we get to move so fast. So, if it was uncertainty with slow development or traditional development, that might be difficult because, you don't want to overinvest in places where you don't have confidence. But I think the fact that the time to build software and build high quality software is sort of like accelerating gives us the ability, like it also frees us to experiment more and to move more quickly within our own teams. And so to me, those things, kind of balance out. Like there's a little bit of like fog of war, kind of challenge of uncertainty. But the fact that we can move so quickly means we're not over investing as we're kind of building and testing these new concepts. And so, I choose to think about it as fun. Ad tech changes, there's big changes, every 2 or 3 or 4 years. And so we're kind of used to this idea of like reinventing ourselves or digesting, like repositioning around big industry shifts. And so, this is another one. It's not just related to ad tech, but I feel like we're well prepared. We've had some practice at doing this. And again, for me, call me crazy, but I think it's sort of fun.
That's awesome. I love that. It's a great perspective. I guess final question for me, for anybody who's kind of starting out or aspiring to work in the media and advertising industries, or even at Adobe in the future, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so we just talked about the fact that like things are changing and there's some uncertainty. So I think for me, advice, to my younger self or anybody else who's thinking about it, maybe train yourself to be curious. I think that's a really good one. Hopefully it's come across. I think it's very hard to do great work if you always assume you know the answer right at the very beginning. Like to me, this is a process of discovery. And so like it's great to have ideas and even conviction, but always be curious, right? Because if you're curious, you'll look for data to prove or disprove the idea. When the industry changes and you don't know something completely, instead of like being concerned or worried, you'll ask why 5 times and you'll get smarter. And you'll just keep kind of preparing yourself for the next thing. So I think being curious is a huge asset in this time of uncertainty. And I would also say this notion of being comfortable in uncomfortable circumstances, because the reality is like a lot is being redefined. Tech is changing. The way we use tech is changing. Roles are changing. Traditional roles like a product manager, a designer, an engineer, like all of that is changing. The way we work together, the process is changing. And look, admittedly, like it's a little, we're stepping on each other's toes a little bit. And but I think for people that can kind of stay in the saddle and just kind of keep showing up in the uncomfortable situation and be part of the solution, or help us figure it out collectively, I think that's going to create a ton of opportunities for people. But again, it's going to be a little uncomfortable as we get from here to there. It's a lot to digest, but don't let that dissuade you, right? Be comfortable in the uncomfortable situations.
Wow, that's pretty good. Wish I'd had that advice 20 years ago when I started out in this space. Greg, look, thanks very much for joining us on the show today. The insights that you guys obviously have access to and the knowledge that you're gaining across this industry that's rapidly changing, you've just at that forefront. And from a global perspective, it must be an awesome experience just to see that from your view.
It is. I'm lucky to be here. It's like I say, it's a great time to sort of be working in product. And I think, again, everybody across the industry is doing great work, but I feel like we're lucky to be, an ad tech company in this broader portfolio of DX. It gives us, everybody's working on their unique edge. But I'm happy with ours. I think we've really figured out how to kind of crack the code a little bit and really create some value for our customers. And that's what we want as a product person. That's what makes me excited. So you're right. I feel like we're lucky to be doing what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, mate, so much. Well, it's time to wrap the show up. I just want to say thank you. And to everybody else watching and listening to us both here in Australia and across the globe, thank you for joining us as well. We look forward to seeing you here next time on Media Tech Talk.
I'm Tim Armstrong, Director at Mangrove Digital. Join me next on Media Tech Talk, where we unpack how businesses unlock the full value of their data, marketing, and advertising technology, simplifying complexity, scaling capability, and delivering real business outcomes. So here's the question. How do you unlock the full value of your data, marketing, and advertising technologies, simplifying complexity, scaling capability, and delivering real business outcomes? Join me in the conversation that's inspiring media minds. That's next on Media Tech Talk.